morning and welcome. This is Tampa Home Talk. I'm your host, Katrina Madewell, joined by Leo Kane with Beryl Engineering and Inspections. Good morning, Leo.
Good morning. I'm so glad to be here. This gloomy weather, hurricane or tropical storm Beryl is brewing in the Gulf right now.
Is Beryl on the list this year?
I know Beryl is on the list this year, and it could be the next storm. I should do a weekday update to see if we have a Beryl out there.
Yeah, you do that, Mr. Non-watch of the presidential debate. You
I did not watch the presidential debate.
Didn't watch it.
Actually, no Beryl yet, but we could have Beryl soon. We have 3 potential candidates.
You're watching it closely. I know you are.
This is the time of year. I believe we might be getting a rainy season. It's still not our standard rainy season, but we're starting to get some rain, which is good. Remember, the more rain we get right now, the less likely we are to get severe hurricane impacts. So we want to be cool. We want to be calm. We want to be wiser.
We need the rain. Everything, plants, flowers, grass, everything needs the rain.
Sinkholes need the rain. Everything needs the rain. But hurricanes don't want the rain. Hurricanes want to get strong. Hurricanes want to do the heavy lifting, and they want to hit drought areas. So the more rain we get, the more protected we should be going into this hurricane season.
Well, Mr. Bill Nye, the science guy here, Leo Kane, the weather guy, hurricane guy, is going to talk all about that, especially as Beryl approaches. But
yeah, Beryl, I'm so excited. We're getting all this publicity right now because they're like, Hurricane Beryl could form, Tropical Storm Beryl could form, Beryl could be next. And I'm like, we're getting all these new
there you go.
New notorieties.
Well, today's show is going to be all about everything you need to know when you're selling a property and avoiding taxes on that sale. Our guest today is going to be Luke Hayes with IPX 1031, which is Investment Property Exchange Services. He is a phenomenal guest. He's a vice president and business development officer located there, IPX 1031's Nashville office, and he specializes in the real estate exchanges, and he's done that since 2018.
I've got some tough questions for him.
Oh, we got some good ones too. And so his territory includes Alabama, Tennessee, Mississippi, and a lot of the Florida Panhandle. And he's going to be joining us today talking all about some of the common misconceptions around 1031 exchanges, the biggest things to know around them, the timing, the deadlines, what's a like-kind exchange, the biggest misconceptions, pitfalls, and running through a scenario I gave him when I spoke to him yesterday. And
you have a friend who?
Yeah. Well, I have a prospective client that
I have a friend who.
Yeah. Anyway, before we jump into that, good morning, Mr. Luke, and we're going to do a market update here in Tampa. So if you want to say good morning to our listeners here on Tampa Home Talk, we're going to run over to our market update and come back to you.
Good morning.
Awesome. So we'll be back with Luke in just a second. So let's report on our number of new listings. Again, we're following 7-day trends in 3 counties. So we're looking at the greater Tampa Bay area, which is going to include Hillsborough County, Pasco County, and Pinellas County, single-family homes in a 7-day trend. So the number of new homes we have reported as of this morning is coming in at 965. And the number of price decreases a sharp 1598. The number of solds are coming in at 873, and our pendings are at 892. That's a 7-day trend for single-family homes here in the greater Tampa Bay area.
So we're basically almost identical to last week. This is amazing. I mean, we've been following these numbers now for years, but since about April, we've been pretty steady, and we continue to be steady. I mean, like last week's 941 to this week's 965. Price decreases are within 2 of each other. Everything is running neck and neck. This is a solid market. This is a very stable, solid market that I'm seeing here. But what is next week's 3-day work week going to do?
Well, I'm sure we'll see the numbers skewed a little bit because a lot of people will likely be closed for Thursday and Friday. So next week, numbers will probably be a little bit wacky, I would imagine. And then the week after that, we'll see a surplus.
Yeah, we'll probably average the 2 weeks. But
correct. Yeah.
I've been amazed since April how steady we've been. I mean, and when do we have the next interest rates announcement?
I think they're going to have one for the presidential election, but I don't know when the Feds are supposed to meet next. I'll look it up and tell you. So I don't expect anything major. Closer to the election, probably.
Because they don't try to influence elections, so they're going to change rates right before it?
That's just my prediction.
Well, if they raise rates, does that mean Biden loses? And if they lower it, does that mean that Biden wins? Is that kind of what the take is?
I think the Americans should form their own opinion based on all the debates and a lot of other factors.
No, I'm just saying that I know the Feds say they don't want to influence the elections, but they influence the elections by changing interest rates, which supports the economy. I mean, you have to think a lot of times presidents are gauged on the strength of the economy, and the Feds are actually the ones that can influence that the most.
Yes, and they should have done it sooner, but that's a debate certainly for another day, right? I would say.
Well, when's the next debate?
I saw one in June, but I'm not.
No,
Debate.
I
I don't know about the debate. Sorry. I don't know. Pat probably knows that.
Yeah, there was a debate last night. Since this isn't a political show and I didn't watch it, we're not going to discuss it. I'm just watching these numbers. These are solid numbers, stable numbers. Looks like a real estate market that I want to be in. This looks like a real estate market that I want to be a part of. It is very, very stable. That's the word I would use to describe this. I can't think of any other word. New listings are ahead of pending listings, are ahead of sold listings. Everything's within 15% of each other. It's just so
Next
stable.
Fed meeting is the end of July.
End of July.
So they're going to meet 31st. I don't think they'll make any changes at that meeting.
No.
Maybe closer to the election.
Closer
but I
to
think
election,
it's gonna stay
yeah.
same.
Create a panic.
All right. So let's roll on over to Luke Hayes. He's with IPX 1031, and we'll chat with him for just a few minutes here before the break. And before we jump in, it's probably a good idea to just explain to the person listening what is a 1031 exchange, which, is just part of the IRS tax code, but we'll let Luke chime in on this. And when might it be a good idea to consider a 1031 exchange? So would you like to jump in this morning for us, Luke?
Basic idea of the 1031 is sell an investment property and defer all the tax associated with the sale, but you got to go through a third-party intermediary and you got to go out and buy more real estate. So the 1031 has been around since 1921, and not one of y'all celebrated the 100-year anniversary with me. I don't take anything in that regard.
Man, that would have been a great topic. We definitely should have had you on when it was 100.
That would have been what, July 1, 2021 would have been the celebration date, since most of these new laws go into effect on July 1? Well, that's Florida. I guess federal laws, when do they go into effect? October 1 or?
Well, you caught me there. I'm not sure on it, but yeah, we could have made it July 1.
Well, we'll celebrate it late with you, Luke.
Why does the IRS allow for it, right? I mean, because at the end of the day, they love tax dollars. We all know that. But the basic idea of why they allow it is you got a lot of people sitting on the fence with their property, and a 1031 allows them to take the plunge, sell their property. So they have to do deferred tax. They have to go out and buy other real estate. So this exchange program basically creates more real estate transactions when there would be.
You may or may not know the answer to this question, Luke, but I'm just curious if you have studied or researched or know anything about the history behind the 1031 exchange and why and how it came to be. Do you know anything about that?
Well, sadly, I might know too much. I would say that initially, in terms of 1031s, you could only do it via a swap. So you would have had to have a property that I wanted, and I had a property that you wanted. We actually had to swap properties. But in 1979, there was a case in California, case Conquer versus Commissioner, that allowed for a delayed exchange, where you can sell to a third party, and then you can go out and buy from another third party. And that's why sometimes in California they refer to 1031s as stalker exchanges, so, or at least a delayed exchange. But I mean, ultimately, the 1031, it's similar to other parts of the tax code. A 401k is fairly close to a 1031. Pre-tax dollars to put in the stock market, your job, company will typically match to a certain percentage. Well, 31 is pre-tax dollars you're putting back into more real estate. So there's various programs that are similar to the 31. Prior to the Jobs Act of 2016, 2017, you actually could do 1031s on personal property. We did exchanges for tugboats and for antique cars. artwork, but since 2017, you're only allowed to do 1031s on real property.
And so the IRS's incentive for allowing this, just like 401k, is what? To spark money into the economy and movement in the real estate market?
Yeah, we had a study done by Ernst & Young. 1031s it's real estate in general is one of the #1 job creators in the U.S. So anytime you have something that incentivizes more real estate transactions, you're increasing property taxes, you're increasing job market. There is a strong incentive for the IRS to have this.
That's true, Luke. As a matter of fact, the National Association of Realtors does a study every year, and they talk about the number of businesses and people and companies that benefit in and around any time a real estate transaction is completed. And I forget what that number is, but it's pretty high. I think it's like 40 something, if my memory serves me correctly. Minimum number of businesses that benefit when a real estate transaction concludes.
I'm pretty confident that real estate it is the #1 job creator in the U.S. So, in terms of why the IRS allows, well, this is a strong boost to the real estate economy, and they don't make it easy. I promise you that. And again, they like helping the tax record. They love the tax dollars, so they don't make it easy for everybody. They don't want 100% success rate. I can't complain too much, otherwise they probably wouldn't have a job if they made it easy. But there is a strong incentive for the IRS to allow for this.
It's amazing to me, Luke, the number of people that I meet, and we dive in with a full consultation so we get an idea why I'm there to begin with. Why am I there to sell a property? Why does somebody want to move? And from there, we are looking at, okay, for example, in the person that we spoke about, they're looking to buy a property closer to where they live. It's 3 hours away. It's kind of hard to manage, and they're just looking for something a little bit closer to home and, with some more land. And so, it's interesting when you start from that place and you talk through it. So many people don't even know about a 1031 exchange. They don't even realize that if and when they sell this property, they're going to get hit with significant taxes.
Well, I got a question. I'm going to open the question of conspiracy theory and evil. Does the existence of a 1031 exchange, which basically is businesses selling and buying at tax-free dollars, does that actually push individuals out and make it easier for like hedge funds to buy all the real estate? It makes it harder for individuals to buy real estate.
How so?
Well, if I was a business and I'm buying and selling land, I have to account for an extra 20 to 30% in taxes. Now I can defer that, and I can still move through, because ultimately we're looking at a depreciation benefit.
Doesn't have to be just businesses, though. People do it.
No, that might be a question that...
It's not just business, right? I mean, the vast majority of the clients I work with, they're selling properties for less than $300,000. People are utilizing 1031s as basically a retirement plan for them and themselves. So I think that's what we talked about in terms of common misconceptions, that 1031s are for the ultra wealthy, or you have to have a certain amount to even justify the 1031. But exchange items set up for clients selling a piece of property for $30,000.
Wow. Well, we're gonna talk about that in a little bit more, Luke, as soon as we come back after this break. Our off-air number is 813-377-2775. You can call or text that off-air number, 813-377-2775. Again, 813-377-2775. This is Tampa Home Talk. I'm your host, Katrina Madewell. We'll be right back after this break. Stick around.
Welcome home. This is Leo Kane with Beryl Engineering and Inspection, asking the tough questions, asking about the myths and the misconceptions surrounding the 1031 exchange. Right before we went on a break, I was under the impression that only wealthy hedge funds can take advantage of a 1031 exchange, but we were learning that the common person, the little folk, the people trying to do the simple transaction, a $30,000 transaction to shaft the IRS, they can get onto the 1031 exchange.
So, Luke, let's dive into this because I want to make sure that we're clear on the rules and kind of how it works. And before you know it, we'll have so much fun we'll run out of time talking. But you can defer the taxes pretty much indefinitely if you want to chat about that. And then I'd love to chat about some of the snafus that people run into where they're unsuccessful with the exchange.
Yeah, sure. I think before we even go into that, we need to understand, like, what are you taxed on when you sell a property? You know, I teach a lot of classes to realtors, CPAs. A lot of times people will ask, well, you know, what am I taxed on? And so a good idea, just to give you a simple hypothetical, is, you know, if I have a property in Florida, well, let's say I live in Alabama, or I live in Georgia. You know, Georgia, Alabama, they have a state tax. Of course, Florida does not. You know, the southern triangle, I call it, Tennessee, Texas, and Florida, all those states have 0% state income tax, and that's why we have so many clients going to those states. But if I have a property I'm selling in Florida, you know, how am I going to be taxed on this? So here's a simple example. I buy a property for $500,000. I do $100,000 in capital improvements. Capital improvements would be I renovate the kitchen, I add in a pool. So now my cost basis is up to $600,000. Well, let's say I sell it for $1 million. Okay, and then I have $90,000 in commission closing costs. Now this property that I sold has been a rental for 12 years. What am I looking at in terms of tax? Well, there's really 4 taxes that apply to the sale. And the first tax is the federal capital gain, and that applies to the appreciation growth. So if I sell property for $1,090,000 commission closing costs, that takes it down to $910,000. And if I bought it for $500,000 and I did $100,000 in capital improvements, that cost basis right there is $600,000. So I have a $310,000 appreciation gain, and the feds would come after me at more than likely 15%. There are certain ways for that federal capital gain to jump to 20% if I reach a certain threshold. So I'd have 15% on about $310,000 a gain. The second tax is the Affordable Health Care Surtax, also known as the Obamacare Surtax. This is a 3.8% surtax that kicks in after a certain threshold, so I definitely would have some of that gain be at the 3.8 as well. And then my third and fourth tax is depreciation recapture tax. You know, when I have a rental, I'm taking depreciation each year, and depreciation has a life cycle. And for residential properties, it's 27.5 years. For commercial properties, it's 39 years. So people take depreciation to offset the passive income that's coming in. But if I just sell the property and don't do a 1031, there's actually a 25% recapture tax that applies. And we call this the hidden tax. A lot of people are not aware of this tax. So if I had an initial basis of $600,000, but I've rented out the property for 12 or 13 years, half of that value has been taken in depreciation. So I would have $250,000 or $300,000 in depreciation, and at 25%, that would be a $75,000 tax hit right there.
Wow.
And my last tax is state tax. And even though my property is in Florida, if I live in Alabama or I live in a state with a state tax, that state will still go after the tax that they feel like they're due. And so overall, my blended rate on this transaction would probably be close to 20 to 25%, somewhere in that range. And more than likely, just based on the numbers I described, $300,000 of depreciation, 25% federal, 5% state, so that's 30%. So that'd be $90,000. And then my 310 appreciation gains would be 15 plus a certain portion of it at 3.8 plus the 5% state tax, so maybe 21, 22%. So that'd be another 65,000 give or take. That'd be 155,000 in tax. If I sold the property and moved on, I would expect to pay somewhere around 150,000 in tax. Well, by doing a 1031 and following all the rules, what tax do I pay? The answer is 0. And that is why people do 1031.
I wonder how many people sell their home not knowing all this, Luke, and then they would get this surprise bill where the next time they file taxes, I guess?
Oh, countless. I mean, probably my biggest reason out is they did a previous sale on an investment. They didn't calculate things like depreciation, recapture, or they thought they weren't on the hook for state tax, and they were given a bill that basically wiped away all their profits. And they said, "Oh, I'm not doing this again," right?
Yeah.
And that's again kind of why the IRS will help with this, because when you see that massive tax bill, you're like, "I'm never going to sell another piece of real estate."
It makes you feel that way.
Go ahead.
What about accelerated depreciation? How does that play into any of this?
Well, accelerated depreciation just simply means you're going to run out of depreciation faster.
Mm-hmm.
People use accelerated depreciation sometimes without understanding that there is this recapture tax. And when you do accelerated depreciation, a lot of times you're actually going to be taxed at ordinary income levels, which is even higher than 25%. So you can do a 1031 with accelerated depreciation, but there are some restrictions on it. Now, one point that your colleague mentioned that I also want to touch on is he mentioned that these big businesses, they're doing 1031s, and this is a way to basically, kind of maybe scam, or I'm not sure the exact terminology you would want to use, but it is a deferral. Whatever depreciation that's been taken, by doing a 1031, you don't get to reset your depreciation schedule. So in that same scenario where if someone did a 1031 and they bought a property for $1 million, they don't get $1 million worth of new value of depreciation. They carry over the original cost basis into the new property. So whatever depreciation has been taken, that still will have been taken even after they complete a 1031.
I have a complicated question for you.
Yes, sir.
So let's say I have a rental property and I'm doing the smart thing. I am depreciating the flooring, the furniture, the fixtures on a 5-year double declining, and then I'm doing the rest of the asset on the 27.5 years. I then sell the property on a 1031 exchange, allowing me to keep all my depreciation. Now, when you're saying it resets, I can then start a new 5-year on the double declining for the flooring and stuff, right?
Yeah, I heard him say it does not. Correct, Luke?
It does not reset. That's correct.
Does not. So he said you carry over that depreciation. It doesn't restart.
No, even for the 5-year stuff, that would be different in the new. It would have a completely different value in the new building.
I mean, I don't know.
Exhausted all depreciation on your sale, and you buy at the exact same value on the purchase side, you will have no depreciation available on the new property.
So you have to go up.
That you can regain more available basis to take depreciation on, more available by buying up with 1031. So I actually don't like when clients take a lot of accelerated depreciation because they run out faster. I think it's a short-term solution. I think the straight line method is the way to really have available depreciation that you can take for years to come. So I think doing a cost tag or any type of fast depreciation schedule, you're just going to run out quicker, and you're going to have to constantly be buying up, even with 1031s, that eventually is going to end up.
So I have a question. Let's say you have someone that maybe it's an older gentleman or woman, and they have acquired these properties over the years, and now they just don't want to manage them anymore. And let's say they want to sell 10 properties, just for example, 10 single-family properties or condos or whatever. And let's say they want to exchange that for a multifamily, like apartment type unit where they're trading up, they're spending more money, and they want to ultimately have a property manager in there as opposed to all 10 different properties. I'd love to know if you can do that, if you could roll 10 of those into a 1031 or how that works. And I know that's a loaded question that we're going to have to answer after the break. This is Tampa Home Talk. I'm your host, Katrina Madewell. Our off-air number is 813-377-2775. We're going to ask Luke that question when we come back. We'll let him answer it rather after the break. And if you have a question about a 1031 exchange, it's a very good time to call or text it to 813-377-2775.
Welcome home. This is Leo Kane with Beryl Engineering and Inspection, bringing you in at the top of the hour for the roundabout half hour through the second half of the segment to talk about numbers. How was that for an intro to numbers?
Well, let's recap the question that I gave Luke right before the break.
Yeah, why are we asking the toughest questions right before the break?
Because those are the questions that people ask, and we got to leave you guys hanging so you come back to listen to left stuff.
Teaser, that's what it was.
So my question was, what happens if you have someone that's acquired property, say over the years, and they're tired of managing them, right? They want to retire, travel in an RV, whatever their heart desires, and they've got all these rental properties, and they'd like to sell them all and buy an apartment complex, right? Maybe a smaller apartment complex with an on-site manager.
And a mobile home.
Can you do that, Luke? Is that something that would qualify on a 1031 exchange, or what's your thoughts on that?
You absolutely can, yes. Now, with the timing of that potentially be available to the client, that'd be tough. Sell 10 properties within the parameters of the 1031, but in a 1031 you can sell and buy anywhere in the U.S., and that includes certain territories. You have the Virgin Islands, Mariana Islands, Guam, all 50 U.S. states, of course, D.C. So people sell and buy all over the world and buy any type of property. And so in 1031, if I sell a single-family residential rental, I have to buy another piece of real estate that's lifetime. But lifetime doesn't mean I have to buy another residential rental. I could buy any type of real property. I could buy an apartment complex. I could buy a car wash, any type of commercial property, any type of residential. I could buy raw land. I could buy passive investments. Those are triple net. There's a 1031 version of the REIT. So if someone really wanted to, be out and travel the world and enjoy life, they probably would actually put their money into a triple net. Those are like your CVS, your Walgreens, your Dollar General, or the 1031 version of a REIT called the Delaware Statutory Trust. You basically put your money in there and they run it on your behalf. But ultimately, any real estate is eligible to buy in a 1031 as long as you have lifetime investment or business intent. So the intent has to be lifetime, not the time. The third benefit is I can sell one and buy multiple, or in your case, sell multiple, buy one. It's kind of inward combination. And then lastly, defer all the tax. But the reason your specific scenario probably wouldn't be possible is the timing aspect of the 1031. The IRS doesn't give me indefinite time to complete an exchange. I'm under a strict clock, and the clock starts when I close. And so there's really some major items that your listeners should be aware of. There's really 3 rules, because when I begin talking about 1031, usually in my classes, towards the end of the second or third hour, because I do 2 or 3 hours of e-class, because I see a lot of eyes that are about to fall asleep, right? I mean, this is a dry subject. There's not a lot of room here for intrigue, so to speak, but, I really just want your listeners to know 3 points, because otherwise they might get lost in the weeds, so to speak. The first thing about 1031 is it has to be set up prior to close. That is an absolute. So if you ever have, if you're listening to this station right now, and you have an investment property, and you're closing, on Monday of next week, you have to have your 1031 set up prior to closing. And again, I've had many clients that have called and they close the day prior or the week prior, and they will argue, well, I didn't touch the money, or I thought I did a 1031, but my realtor told me that I just had to leave it with the closing company. But none of that is true. You have to use a third party, and they call that a qualified intermediary. And that's what the company I work for does. IPX 1031. We're the oldest and largest qualified intermediary in the country. But you must set up a 1031 prior to close. So that's the first thing.
So do you get those calls, Luke, where they're like, it's Friday, I heard you on Tampa Home Talk, I'm closing Monday, can you set up my 1031? Do you get those?
Well, I'm multitasking as we speak.
It is Friday.
Right when I called in, where a client closing on the 2nd. So that, what is that, the 2nd of July?
Tuesday.
Yeah, next week.
Yeah, so I'm kind of working on that. Now I'm going to focus on it after I finish this up. And yes, they're closing on Tuesday. They want to do a 1031. usually when people email or call us, they get the name wrong. They're saying, I want to do a 1088 or a 1035. And I say, do you need a 1031? They say, there's no time, right? I don't want to pay you. But yeah, we'll get that done. So yes, people call us all the time. We call these rushing people. People are rushing to get their exchange documents in.
I've got the next tough question.
Once or twice a month, people will call me after they close on their sale. And I have to inform them, doesn't matter if you have another property picked out. Doesn't matter if you yourself have to touch the month. If you didn't set up a 1031 with a qualified intermediary, you will be paying that tax. You have recognized the game.
So the first big rule is set up the 1031 prior to close. What was the second one?
The second one is don't wait until you close to start looking for a purchase. If you close in the 1031, you have 45 days post-close to go out and identify or search for other properties. 45 calendar days. You don't get days off for holidays. You don't get days off for weekends. Feeling sick, dog died. It does not matter. These are 30 calendar days.
And if it falls on a business, what happens if that 45 days falls on a weekend or a holiday?
Yeah, it's a great question. We have probably multiple clients that 45th is ending on the 4th. They better get their form in, their identification form in the day prior, because that is an absolute timeline. So you don't get any leeway if your 45th ends on holiday or ends on a Saturday or Sunday.
So it
Unfortunately, a little bit cut short.
does not roll to the next business day. It cuts you short. Okay.
I have my tough question.
Is it related to this?
It is related to the 1031 exchange.
Okay.
So I'm a homeowner. I live in Tampa. I just got a job in Miami. I have to sell my personal house. In Miami, real estate's more expensive. So I sell my personal house and I buy a much smaller house in Miami that's actually more money. Am I able to 1031 exchange any of that?
You're not, but there's actually better news for you. So your primary is not eligible for a 1031, but as long as you've lived in your primary at least 2 years, you should qualify for the primary residence exclusion, which is section 121 of the Internal Revenue Code. And it basically states, again, as long as you live in at least 2 years, you get $250,000 tax-free. If you file single, $500,000 tax-free if you're married and file joint returns. So what's better, tax-free or tax-deferred? Tax-free. So
Definitely.
You'll get tax-free dollars on that home. And you don't have to do anything with setting up an exchange or anything. That's something that you can just sell your property and you just have to file the 121 exclusion when you file your tax return for the following year. Now, for a lot of clients, typically they're selling out of Miami or they're selling out of these big cities and they bought the property for, let's say, $500,000. Now it's worth $1.5 million, and they're married. Well, just your cap on that exclusion at $500,000 of profit. So if you have gain that exceeds that $500,000, a lot of people say, well, can I 1031 that? And the answer is no. And again, your primary is not eligible because of your personal use. So the IRS doesn't use personal use as a factor for qualifying a property as an investment. So 1031s are for only investment or business use properties. So that would be land use, that would be residential rentals, and that could be a short-term rental or a long-term rental. That would be any type of commercial property. But a lot of clients think that they're second home or think that, okay, I haven't lived in my primary for 2 years, so I can do a 1031 as a backup. No, you cannot, because of the personal use.
And we're going to get into some of those other little dicey things too. I just want to make sure Luke has time to make all three of the major points. So set up the 1031 exchange prior to closing because you can't touch the money. You got a solid 45 days or less to find a like-kind exchange property to buy, right?
That's right.
And then the third point.
Third one is use a qualified intermediary that knows what they're doing. You know, there was an attorney in Florida that stole close to $7 million of client exchange funds. There have been companies that have gone out of business without proper bonding and insurance on their files. There was a company in New York last year that was a victim of wire fraud and close to $1 million of client funds. They didn't have, again, proper bonding and insurance, and the client lost the majority of that. You know, I had a client that I worked with that used a small company company in 2008, and they invested his money without his knowledge while they were holding his fund as a part of the 1031.
Ouch.
They invested into real estate, and the market crashed, and he personally lost $400,000. So my third rule is use somebody that does this day in, day out. Now, coincidentally, as an attorney, as a company, this is all we do day in, day out. So that's a little bit of a plug for myself. But you want to use an expert that knows what they're doing, because there are a lot of rules that we're not going to cover in an hour radio call. I wouldn't be able to cover it in a 4-hour radio call.
Sounds like we're going to have you back, Luke. So this leads into one of the questions that I did have. So when you're selecting a 1031 exchange company or a qualified intermediary like yourself, what are some of the things that people should consider, or questions they should ask before they actually select a company or a QI to help them with their exchange?
Really the first question should be like, why do we exist, right? What is our role in this transaction? How I frame it is the IRS, they don't trust you to do your activity. They don't trust you to and be compliant. And so they want you using a third party. So they don't trust you. They don't trust you using any family members that you may have. They don't trust you using your personal attorney. They don't trust you using your CPA. Your closing company should not be doing your own 1031, even though that happens quite a bit. There's a strong argument that you have constructive proceeded to gain if anyone that you use, you have an agency relationship over, handles your 1031. So you got to use a third party. But in terms of selecting that third party, in my opinion, the biggest thing you need to be aware of is how are they protecting your money? You know, what type of accounts are these going into? You know, because a lot of times we have clients that are selling properties, and this is their entire life's work, right? And whether or not it's that $30,000 sale I think, or a $20 million sale, you know, client fund protection is paramount. So I can only speak in regards to myself and IPX, but our accounts, they are segregated direct deposit bank accounts. So your exchange is completely separated from every other exchange. So you definitely want to use a company that has a segregated account. You don't want to use somebody that puts all the money in the account. That's what that Florida attorney did. You know, it's basically kind of a Ponzi where no one knew where the funds were coming and going.
Oof.
You also want to make sure that they're using the right bank. You know, you don't want to be using just a small bank or a bank with a small number of branches. You want to use a company that has a banking relationship with large financial institutions.
Luke, we have to pause right there to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll finish up that thought, and I'd love to also answer, what's the cost to do a 1031 exchange, and when does someone need to pay the fee? And then also some examples of maybe non-like kind exchanges or boot. And I had other questions, which I know we're going to run out of time for, but we're going to answer as much as we can when we come back after the break, and any other off-air questions. 813-377-2775. We'll be right back.
Welcome home. This is Leo with Beryl Engineering and Inspection, and it's not looking like I'm going to get to talk about my 7 listings. So
we'll try to squeeze them in at the end, but
I have low hopes for that.
So I guess, Luke, what's the best way for us to spend our last 7 minutes? Should we talk about, I would think probably what are some examples of non-like kind exchanges or boot, and if we can squeeze in there some of those little one-off things that people don't think about that could disqualify their exchange.
I hear that all the time. Leo, I think that's your name, right? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's...
You probably have that sentiment. You seem to have a little bit of a pessimist life to you to some degree.
That's because he's an engineer.
No, I'm just the skeptic. I love 1031 exchanges. I'm just the skeptic in the room that needs to bring out the fear-mongering from our listener base.
That's just his role on the station.
necessarily true. So there are different strategies with 1031. One of them is treating it like a 401. People that have a 401, they utilize it to grow their retirement portfolio, and then when they are retired, they tap into it. Now, at that time, they will pay the tax, but the argument is because I use free tax dollars over the years, my portfolio is as of a much larger size, right, than if I use simply post-tax. So some people utilize 1031s, they grow their portfolios over the years via the free tax dollars that come from utilizing a 1031, and then they cash out when they're retired and they've made their money, right?
So Luke, could someone sell the properties through a 1031 and then put in like a REIT with a pool of properties?
They could. Now, again, REITs aren't eligible because you're buying shares.
Got it.
But there is another statutory trust, which you are buying a fractional undivided interest of a large portfolio of real estate that's run on your behalf. So that's a good way to put your money into something passive that's not going to provide you amazing returns, but should provide you stable returns and protect your money. Some people end up buying a future primary or a future vacation home. We have many people that buy their forever home or their dream home. And the rules are you buy a property, you got to rent it out for the first couple of years, but then after 2 years, you can move in. Okay? And then understanding the idea of the 121 exclusion, if I use one of my rentals to buy a primary, a future primary, well, I rent that out, and then after 2 years, I move into my tax-deferred property, and then I sell my primary, which will give me tax-free dollars, then I can do whatever I want. And then I can stay in that home for the rest of my life. So some people end up buying a future second home, future primary. Some people do partial 1031. So a 1031 isn't an all or nothing. Now, to fully defer with an exchange, they do want you buying equal or greater to what you sold for. So a 1031 is not just a profit. If you have a loan on your sale, the IRS expects you to make that up on the back end as well with either a new loan or outside cash. So people with debt on their property, they can certainly still do 1031. But the 1031 is not just the net proceeds from their sale. They got to make up the debt as well.
So they have to get a replacement loan. If they owe $50,000, they have to have another loan for $50,000 or cash?
They would.
Okay.
Either get another loan or go out of pocket with outside cash.
What if it were less? Like the property they want to buy is less. Does that completely disqualify them on the exchange?
No, and that's kind of where the partial comes in. So if I have an adjusted basis of $500,000 and I sell for $1 million, let's just simplify it. No closing costs. My gain is $500,000, right? If I want to do a 1031 and walk away with no tax, I need to buy at $1 million. But if I want to buy for less, or if I have a loan on my sale and I don't want to make up that loan with another loan on my purchase, and let's say I buy for $800,000. Well, what happened? Well, what I did is I deferred $300,000 in gain because I covered my initial carryover basis with $500 by how much? $300,000 by buying at $800,000. And the $200,000 that I didn't reinvest, just that amount would be taxed. We call that boost. The industry term EOOT, it just refers to any amount left over that's still taxed. Now, people do partial exchange. Why? Because paying tax on $200,000 is a lot better than paying tax on $500,000. If I have $200,000 in gain to pay tax on rather than $500,000, I might not be hitting those higher tiers, right? I might not be hitting that 3.8 affordable health care surtax, or that bump where the Fed cap gain goes from 15 to 20%. The partial exchanges are done all the time, but y'all are going to love this last part. A lot of people just defer their whole life. They never cash out. They defer until they're dead. Well, your listeners won't like that part, but that is facts of life. But when you die and your heirs receive your property, the heirs are entitled to get the appraisal on the real estate that was left to them. And whatever the appraised value was, their basis is stepped up to that amount. So if I have a property for $2 million that I paid $200,000, my gain is $800,000, right? I have a significant tax. Well, I die. My heir receives it. They get an appraisal. The appraised value is $1 million. The base and stepped up from my adjusted basis of 200 all the way up to fair market value when they got to $1 million. And if they decided to sell and they sold for $1 million and their stepped up basis is $1 million, how much do they pay in tax? The answer is zero, right? And we call this swap till you drop.
Swap till you drop.
Love it.
I love that. So essentially, you escape the capital gains taxes because you die and your heirs are not paying it.
You're 1,600, right? But your heirs are benefit. Now, typically when I talk to realtors, or how can you sell this to your clients, and how do I feel on this? Well, that sounds a lot to me like the American dream, or maybe what it once was. I know y'all don't like to get political on this. The American dream and building generational wealth, that's what people strive for. You want to leave your kids or your heirs in a better situation than you. Now, the benefit to you as a taxpayer doing 1031s is you're able to grow your portfolio faster. And it's easy math. If I am not given X amount to the IRS, I have more money to spend and buy bigger, better, nicer, faster. Studies that back investors that utilize 1031s, they grow their portfolios faster and they get a higher return.
Well, Luke, I can certainly tell that you are the one that provides the continuing education to attorneys, CPAs, and agents alike. So we're going to have you back here on Tampa Home Talk because it's already Friday at the top of the hour and we are out of time. Our off-air number, if you want to connect with Luke and pick his brain a little bit more, I'd highly encourage you to do so. 813-377-2775. Again, 813-377-2775. Love where you live or we're going to fix it. Welcome home.